I'm Travis Weaver, and you're listening to The Good People Project.
All right, let's get rolling. Negative stories get headlines, but there are a ton of good and decent people stepping up to serve an elected office. The Good People Project tells the unsung story of those who wake up every day to do good and selfless work for the American people. With new episodes out every Monday, please share this episode to help spread our positive message. Today's guest is the perfect model of what a judge should be. His experience is second to none. He served as an associate judge the last 8 years, spent 12 years in private practice, and another 11 years serving the public in the state's attorney's office. He plays an outsized role within the community and is extremely engaged with helping the next generation, so much so that Peoria Public Schools recognized him with the highly regarded State of the Schools Innovation Award. Oh yeah, and he served his country for 12 years as an officer in the Army Reserves. He's an honorable judge, gifted legal mind, great man, and I'm proud to call him a friend. So, without any further ado, the wise and talented Judge Frank Ierulli. Judge, how's life?
It's good, and thank you for those kind words, Travis.
Well, it was a little tricky just going through your bio because there was some pretty good stuff in there that I left out. Riverfront Museum, Boy Scouts. I think there's a school, early childhood education that you're pretty involved with. So I guess when you've had a career such as yours, there's a lot to pick from, so it makes the introduction pretty easy.
Well, thank you. You know, I've been home since 1992, and I've been enormously fortunate to do a lot of things and to be invited to participate in a lot of things. And with that, one thing leads to another and to another and to another, and it just feels good giving back to your community.
Yeah, so with 30 years in law under your belt, between being a judge, private practice, state's attorney's office, I always thought that lawyers were supposed to be rich. So what's the deal? You don't like putting your toes in the beach in Florida? You don't want to be done? You want to climb a new mountain here and get reelected?
Well, I've got 2 kids in school, so I'm going to be working for a while. I've got a daughter in medical school and a son in law school. So once we get them through school and get them settled, I may think about retirement, but I'm still awfully young.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things I want to do.
Yeah. So speaking of school, I was hoping that you could kind of start us off by giving myself and the listeners a little bit of an education on maybe judge school. So you've got state courts and federal courts. Within that, you've got Supreme Appellate Circuit. I think a lot of people know that you're a judge or know that judges exist, but don't really understand the different circuits and districts and levels. So can you just give us a little 30,000-foot summary on what exactly you're running for and just what the different types of judges are?
Sure. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but Illinois has a unified court system, which means that our trial level courts handle everything. We don't have special city courts and the like. So we have trial courts, which are county courts, which are courts of general jurisdiction that handle everything from family cases, divorce, and things like that, all the way through criminal courts. That's the first level. The second level is the appellate court level, which is the second level that reviews what happens in the trial court. And the highest level court in Illinois is the Illinois Supreme Court, which is the third level. Now, within that, you have different levels of judges. The first rung on the ladder is called an associate judge, and those judges are picked by our local.
And this is at the circuit level.
At the circuit level.
Got it. So within that bottom bracket, the circuit bracket, you've got a couple different categories within there.
Yes, exactly. Associate judges, as I said, are at the trial court level. They're picked through a competitive process by the circuit judges, the second level judges. The circuit judges are still trial court judges, but they're either selected by the Supreme Court and then have to run for the seat, or they're elected directly from the citizens within that circuit or county. The third rung on the ladder is the appellate court, and they are from groups of counties. And in our appellate court district, there are 41 counties that make that up. So it's gigantic. It goes all the way from Rockford to, I believe, Edwardsville or the Quincy area. And then the highest level, the fourth rung on the ladder, is the Supreme Court justices, which review the appellate court.
Something else I was going to ask that's interesting about your race is, and I didn't know this, that the Bar Association says if the candidates are qualified or unqualified, and in that determination, 90-some% said that you were qualified and a lot more attorneys had been before you. Can you just walk a little bit through what you versus your opponent and what exactly that designation was?
Now, I need to be very careful on how I describe this because there are very tightly prescribed rules about the Illinois State Bar Association polling process. The Illinois State Bar Association does a wide-ranging poll for judicial candidates, and they send that out to all ISBA members and also folks that ask for a ballot. And within that, the people that are within your circuit can determine whether you are recommended or not. They don't use the term qualified.
Recommended.
Recommended. And as a part of that, you have to have at least 65% of those responding to the poll say that you're recommended to receive a recommended rating. Now, everybody that votes as a part of the poll must certify that they're familiar with the candidates. And again, that's a term of art used by the bar polling folks. And so it isn't folks that don't know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be familiar with you and your work. So I've been a lawyer for 32 years. I touched a lot of other lawyers and had a lot of other lawyers appear before me in the last 7 or 8 years as a judge. So a lot more people know who I am and the work I've done. And I feel blessed that I spent 32 years as a lawyer telling a lot of lawyers no, either while I was in private practice or at the state's attorney's office or as a judge, because every decision I make, ultimately, at the most basic level, there's a winner and there's a loser. They either get what they want or they don't get what they want. And I still received a very high rating, so I'm awfully proud of that.
Yeah, and I appreciate just how delicate you handle the question, because I think it just shows how important the honor code of being a judge is to you and following the rules. And one thing that is kind of nice about judge races is that they are partisan in the sense that the letter's next to your name. But for a judicial race, you don't really have a platform like a legislator would have of I want to get this accomplished. It's more a question of, this is my background, this is the experience that I have, this is why I believe I'm qualified for the position, which must make it a little tricky about going through the campaign process, is that there's some things you can't talk about. But I also I think it's a little bit relieving too that it's not about Judge Ierulli's opinion about things. It's about Judge Ierulli's dedication to the law and his experience that has led for him to be in this esteemed position.
I agree. I don't get to talk about anything fun.
Yeah.
I only get to talk about my background and experience, and I don't get to tell people how I'm going to rule on cases.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't even go so far as to indicate how I would rule on a case or not. But that's the right way to do it, because everybody ought to be able to come before a judge and receive a fair shake. And if a judge telegraphs that they feel so strongly about an issue that the person that comes before them isn't going to get a fair shake, that's just not the way our system's set up, and that's not right. So it is a bit, it does make things a bit easier, but it also makes it a bit more difficult because judge races are low information races. Most folks never go to court, and they only come to court if they're forced to, being summoned to come to court, either as a litigant or as a juror. And because we're at the end of the ballot, people just don't know much about us, and really are in many respects not that concerned until they have to go in front of a judge.
Mm-hmm. So let's say we've been through judge school. Maybe we could take a little spin through civics class here. So we have 3 branches of government: executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch. Legislative branch writes the laws. Executive branch executes the laws, manages agencies. Judicial branch interprets laws. So what would you say it is necessarily that in your role you think is necessary to be good at what exactly it is that you do? And maybe for the listeners as well as me, what exactly is it that you would say that you do?
Well, in large measure, my job is to listen. And it's really as simple as that. I listen to the litigants that come before me, and then I apply the evidence or the facts to the law. And when you break it down to those basic component pieces, that ensures that everybody gets a fair shake, that you're not concerned about who the litigants are or their background or who they know, but simply hearing what the facts are and applying it to the law. And that's the only way that everybody gets treated the same and that everybody is treated fairly.
Are there a couple times when you feel like you've really been able to do an effective job? I know that kids are so important to you and our juvenile system, and just making sure that kids especially have a fair shot at life. Are there a couple tricks that you've been able to apply that you think really can take a kid that's continuing to have encounters with the law, repeatedly coming before you, and you're able to just tweak something that's going on in that young person's life that's able to get them back onto the right track where they're going to have a successful future?
Well, anecdotally, I can tell you that there's a young lady that I think about all the time who had a terrible upbringing in foster care from a very young age, and she was moved from different households, foster parents, to sometimes institutional settings and back, and she was terribly angry, understandably, but on occasion, she would act out on that anger and would either batter other people or teachers or people that were trying to help her. And when she came before me, and she came before me a lot, there had to be a consequence for those bad acts. But as we went through this process with her, I learned, and you could just see it in her eye, she had this spark of intelligence. I mean, very, very well spoken for a 14-year-old. And I learned later that when she went to school, she was reading at about 6 or 7 grades above her normal level. And in fact, she was tested in one process as a college level reader. We were fortunate enough to find her an appropriate foster parent after really looking pretty hard. And this young lady graduated from high school in 2.5 years and was at ICC when I last heard and doing remarkably well. And these sorts of things can happen and should happen because it's not the child's fault that they were exposed to those terrible circumstances. Mm-hmm. It's very different between a child and an adult when they commit acts of criminality. While there's always got to be the accountability piece, there has to be, because the public deserves to be safe, whether it's a child committing a crime or an adult. We've got to, particularly with the children, look at what the cause is and see if we can fix that. We shouldn't experiment with public safety. I'm not saying that at all. But if we can remedy the problem, we should. And even if you don't believe in rehabilitation, you have to believe in economics, that every kid that we get back on track, every kid that we get through school is one citizen that the community isn't going to have to support down the road. And I truly believe that if we focus in on these young folks, and some of them aren't going to want our help, but they're children. They don't get to decide that. We have to provide them with the resources they need to be successful, and we can do that. There's a project that I do want to talk to you about, if we have time, that we're going to establish a juvenile treatment court.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about it.
Which I think is going to be wildly successful for some of these kids that simply don't have the prospects that many of our other children have. So I could talk for hours about this, and I'm awfully, awfully excited about it. In fact, I volunteered to go back to juvenile court next year, which I'm sure many of my peers would say is a demotion, but
yeah, it's just your passion.
Well, and I can make a difference there. I have no doubt.
Yeah.
And I can make our little piece of the world a better place to live, a safer place to live, and help some people that desperately need our help.
What are some of the levers that you can pull to try to get a kid back on track? I mean, one of them is just simple accountability and justice. If you're acting out, maybe there's some sort of punishment that goes with that. I assume another one is changing the home environment. Education's probably on the table, but are there anything else that I'm missing besides those three, or would you say that those are kind of the three big
Well, absolutely.
avenues?
Juvenile court, as it exists now, and the way it's existed since 1992, when I was first in there as an assistant state's attorney, is a cookie cutter approach. And the law demands that, because if you treat this person the same way as you treat the next person, you ensure that everybody's being treated the same and everybody is being treated fairly. And that's what due process requires. But children are different. And we have to look first not at what the symptom is, but what is the cause. And if we can make that change and provide them with the resources they need to make that change, it's going to have a huge impact on the community. But specifically, your question is, what is the lever? Every kid responds differently. In raising my own kids, they were athletes, and to get them to be compliant and do what I asked, I'd say, well, if you want to play soccer this fall, you're going to have to do X. Or if you want to do this, you're going to have to do Y. That lever may not work for some of these kids. However, I do believe that some of these kids that are perhaps more directionless than some of the other kids need maybe a mentor, or maybe these kids have a mental health issue that they need counseling that must be addressed, or maybe no one's just taken the time to sit down with them and say, yeah, what you're doing is wrong. We're going to hold you accountable, and we're going to have high expectations for you. And you know what? If you need help, you tell us what you need, and we'll do what we can within reason to help you.
What would needing help look like, and what are some things that you could help a kid get? I mean,
well, this is an easy one. This is an anecdotal story that I was talking about with one of the teachers at the Knoxville school today, just before I came here. And I told him about that there was a young man who was on probation who wasn't going to school, and they couldn't get him to go to school. And they tried all the levers, if you don't go to school, we're going to violate your probation. If you don't go to school, the judge may send you to the detention center. And none of that worked. And then finally he said to him, I'm the stinky kid at school. I don't have any clean clothes. I get teased about it. I'm embarrassed. And the probation department went and got that family through some grant funds, a washer and a dryer. Now, I'm not saying that sort of thing is the magic bullet, and I'm not saying that the community ought to buy everybody a washer and dryer, but those little things can make a difference. And I know it does, because while I was at the Knoxville school telling this story, one of the teachers walked me into the next room and said, look at this. We got a washer and dryer, and we make it available to our students on Saturdays and Sundays. So there's a need out there, and perhaps it's a little thing, but if that little small investment makes more and more kids go to school, if it gets one kid to go to school, that's a huge win, because, there's the old Bible parable, teach a person to fish, they can feed themselves for a lifetime. And it's as simple as that. Every kid that we get through school, down the road, they'll be able to make a living wage job, be able to take care of themselves and their children, and become a productive member of our community. And that's just what we want.
Yeah, I think, and it all goes back to your point of, I asked what you said you do as a job, and you said it's about listening. And I think that's just well shown by that story, because every kid doesn't need a washer and dryer. That's not a silver bullet. But because you listened and you heard what the root cause of their court issues were, we were able to solve the root cause and hopefully get that kid back on track in school, graduate from high school, productive job, probably going to be a healthier parent because they have all those things. And so now not only do you change this one student's life, you have ripple effects through time because they're going to treat people better. They're going to be better parents. They're going to be more productive members of society. And, like I said in my intro, I mean, that's just why I think that you're such a model for how a judge should be, because, you go in, you listen, and you have enough experience with the system to know these are the tools I can try. These are the levers I can pull. This is how I can help this unique kid with their unique circumstances have a better chance. You're not going to always guarantee success, but you're just raising the probability. I think probably as much as you come in contact with the kids, it's just about raising the odds that they can be successful.
Absolutely. And everybody thinks that if you threaten somebody with being detained or going to jail, that's going to get you the behavior you want. And it will for a certain segment of folks. However, for other folks, it's not a motivator at all. And sometimes we have to think outside the box to achieve our objectives, which are ultimately benefiting the community as a whole.
So I think a lot of people think about judges and, they get these images in their head of Judge Judy or, some Hollywood video. Are there some things that you think are just misunderstood about judges? Probably one of them is that you probably don't have a lot of trials. And I think a lot of people assume judge oversees trial. A lot of the things you do, do you ever have a jury? I'm sure you had at points, but I had one last week.
Do you?
So it's not as uncommon as I might think.
No. It depends on what court you're in.
Yeah. So what courts would have juries and which ones wouldn't?
Well, criminal courts are going to have more jury trials than any of the other courts.
Mm-hmm.
The high volume courts like traffic court or misdemeanor would usually have the most jury trials because there's the most opportunity for them. Felony court has a lot of jury trials because the stakes are so high. I'm in what's called law court, which is a civil court handling medical malpractice cases, large commercial disputes. So depends on the year. Last year, I did a lot of jury trials. This year, I've only done a handful. They're both medical malpractice cases. Stakes were high, and they're very time-consuming. But sometimes the attorneys can't resolve these cases themselves, and they need our jurors to resolve them. And I could go on and on about this because our jury system is really something phenomenal. Think about it. You have a dispute that you can't resolve. You get to pick who decides to resolve that dispute. Sometimes it's a judge. You get to pick that. Or sometimes it's 12 members of our community that you get to pick. They don't just file those 12 folks into the box and they become your jurors. The litigants get to decide on them. So you get to decide who decides your case. And I think that creates an enormous sense of legitimacy in the whole process. And you may be unhappy with the outcome, but you've decided who's going to decide that case. And that's got to be worth something.
What are some things that you learned about having successful jury trials, and not necessarily that you're guiding the outcome because you want to do that, but I do think that you guide them to facts. You guide them to what they can and can't, consider. I'm sure that probably in your first jury trial and your most recent one, there's just certain things that you picked up along the way about how to help that jury be successful.
Well, the judge's role in trials differs, but depending on what kind of trial it is. At a bench trial, the judge is the fact finder, the person that decides what the facts are and what weight to give them. In a jury trial, that's the jury's role, to be the person or the people who will decide what the facts are and what weight to give them. The judge's role in a jury trial is merely to make sure that both sides get a fair trial and make sure that the litigants introduce evidence that is not only admissible but appropriate for the trial, and to act as the referee to make sure that the train stays on the tracks and to make sure that the jury is able to hear the evidence and to pay attention to it. Because, you have 12 people sitting around a table deciding a case, it's hard to get 12 people to decide what they want to have for lunch.
Yeah, right.
Let alone make a weighty decision about whether to give someone a huge chunk of money or whether that a doctor or a nurse is liable for an injury that could have happened to any of them.
What are the different levels that they said? I mean, so there's beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, are there different levels of how confident a jury has to be? And is that on a case-by-case basis? Does Illinois have a set standard? Or, I mean, because I know it's different in different jurisdictions.
Sure. Well, I think what your question is, what are the different burdens of proof?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, all criminal cases have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Very, very high standard. Very high standard. And I'm often amazed that we're ever able to meet it. For civil cases, it's by the preponderance of the evidence.
Because, like, you know, say for, I'll just pick one that folks know, you know, the OJ trial. Okay, so I guess that there was, this is like before, I think I was like born when the white Bronco chase happened. But so let's say it's beyond a reasonable doubt, and then they introduced the white glove. Mm-hmm. And you're like, man, I'm pretty sure it was him, but I still just maybe have this inkling in my gut that I'm not positive. So it's not beyond a reasonable doubt.
Exactly.
So that's is that the highest threshold beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yeah, and the simple fact of the matter is that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Because we should never send somebody to prison that is not guilty. And the only way to assure that is to have that very, very high level and burden of proof, because that protects you and me too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the highest level is beyond a reasonable doubt. Then are there also lower levels of burden?
Generally speaking, there are a number of different standards, but 95% of them are beyond a reasonable doubt and by the preponderance. And by the preponderance is the civil standard.
Got it. This is a really tough question, Judge. How satisfying is it to swing that hammer?
You know, I have a gavel. However, I usually I've never had to use it. I have it there for guests.
Yeah. That makes sense. The judges never use it. The guests always want to swing the gavel.
Sure. And it's most used. One of the best things that I do as a judge is do adoptions. Because imagine it. The parents there pick this child. And while we're all enormously proud of our children, the parent picks this child to be their kid. Mm-hmm. And many times, if the child's older, the child has a say in that.
Yeah.
And it is an enormously happy, I mean, marriages aren't this happy that we do at the house.
Yeah.
And everybody there is so happy and it's joyous and you're creating a new family unit. So I have the family come up and I have the little kid get to bang the gavel and to give them a part of the experience. It's really a joyous thing.
And so once you're put on the robes for the first time, I'm sure you probably swing that gavel once now that you're a judge, and then it just kind of sits there unless you got a special occasion.
Yeah, I've never used the gavel for in court.
So what was your upbringing like? Is this a path that you always thought that you were going to be on? Were one of your parents an attorney, or how did you get here?
Well, I grew up in Peoria. My father was a dentist. My mother was a small business owner. She owned and started Alexander Travel.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she was a nurse by training. And when we were in high school, she started it. And it really grew. She had 50 employees one time.
Wow.
Was in 5 or 6 different states.
Wow.
With a lot of government work. And it's still going on. My little sister's running it. My father was a dentist, but in the reality, he really wanted to be a sculptor.
Yeah.
But he stressed education. All of his kids, we all went to graduate school. I got 2 sisters that are PhDs and professors. I got a sister who's a MSW, Master's of Social Work, and has her own social work office, and brother that's a lawyer. But I've always been interested in politics. And I went to graduate school for a year and thought I'd go on to become an academic like my sisters. But when I was in graduate school...
So you're one of how many kids?
5.
Okay.
When I was in graduate school, I realized that what I was really interested in was the law. because the law is our connection to the government and the government's connection to us. And I went to law school. I thought I'd do real estate of some sort, transactional work, but I clerked at the state's attorney's office and found that I loved it. I loved it. And I was enormously fortunate to do a lot of trials in a short period of time. I mean, but even before I had a law license, I got to do about 30 trials.
And you were there for 11 years.
Yeah.
It seems like a long time to be at the state's attorney's office. I mean, isn't it usually they do a couple year stint and then you're on to something else?
I only thought I'd be there for a year or two. I wanted to do some murder trials because I thought it sounded like it'd be fun. But I kept getting promoted. I know it sounds a little much, but I was enormously fortunate that within 2 years after being at the state's attorney's office, I was already in felony court and got to do a murder case, well, in less than 2 years of being a lawyer. And then I went to this other job.
Can you tell us about it? I mean, your first murder case, I mean, well, I'm sure you're probably a lot of unknowns, right? You've never tried anything like this before. It's a big case, right? Somebody died. And I'm sure that there's also probably a learning curve where you might have looked back on that case several years down the road and thought, wow, I can't believe I missed this or I didn't try that.
Well, that there's some truth to that. But at the state's attorney's office, if you want to, you can do a lot of trials. You can avoid a lot of trials, but if you want to do a lot of trials, you can. And I went from high volume courtrooms where we were doing a lot of trials. I started out in juvenile. And so those cases are basically felony cases. You know, the first case I ever sat in on was a running gun battle at the Warner Homes. And we're still having those. The Warner Homes is gone, but there's still running gun battles.
Yeah.
And you just do a lot of cases over and over again. And while I'll admit I was terrifying, it was also great fun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I never had a better law job, even as a judge. I never had a better law job than being a felony trial assistant. It was just a heady thing. And we did lots of trials. And we had good judges up there, and they just kept coming. And like many young people in a new job, you don't know any better. They give you a file, you go up, you do it. They give you a next file. And there were occasions where we would do 2 jury trials a week. The state's attorney even picked a jury for me once. And I finished this trial and came in and finished up that one.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had an instance where, I'm sure in the state's attorney's office, where you really felt like you found a smoking gun? There was one piece of evidence that you were able to uncover or find or piece together somehow that you felt like just really tied the case together. I mean, you know, I can just imagine long hours, you're poring over files, you're looking for that one missing piece of evidence, and then you get it, and all of a sudden, all the puzzle pieces can click into place.
And of course that happens, but normally cases are not charged until they're ready.
Mm-hmm.
And all the investigation is done by the law enforcement agencies, comes to the state's attorney's office, then we determine if there's...
So that would be more of a detective light bulb that would go off, perhaps, in a prosecutors.
But more importantly, I did have moments where I figured out that the person wasn't guilty.
Oh, wow.
And I dismissed the case.
Oh, wow.
With full support of the state's attorney, because that's our role.
Right.
To ensure that justice is done. And that is far more important than anything else we do. So, and that's what made me love the job so much, because I felt that I was always on the right side, because I had the ability, after looking critically at the evidence, to make a determination on whether I wanted to go forward.
Yeah. Well, I think that just highlights why you're the right man for the job. I mean, you think about how many prosecutors want to make a name for themselves, and I'm sure 99% of them are good. It's like any profession. It's the 1% that's bad that kind of makes a bad name for everybody. But just to, you know, recognize that you're selfless and want to serve the people, and if you find that somebody's not guilty, the right thing to do is to say they're not guilty, and not to continue to push and find evidence to make your case when maybe you feel like you even know that you don't have a case.
Yeah, the state's attorney's most important job is to make sure that the right people are being charged, not to bow to public pressure, but to determine whether the evidence supports moving that case forward. And can you imagine the enormous responsibility that a state's attorney has the elected state's attorney. He's subject to public pressure like anybody else, but he has to decide whether it's appropriate to charge this person. And once you're charged, everything changes. Everything changes, both for that person and how he's going to be treated for the rest of his life, even if cases are dismissed down the road. So it's a huge responsibility. And for those folks that step up to be the elected state's attorney to make those determinations, it's a tough thing.
It seems like juveniles and kids kind of have a soft spot for you. I mean, Boy Scouts, Peoria Public Schools, juvenile court. Has it always been that way, or did you just have an experience in that court where you just really felt like serving kids was what you were called to do, or maybe just having kids of your own?
I know it sounds a little much, but we only have so many years on this planet. And this is a place that I know I can make a difference. I've been enormously fortunate to be a prosecutor, to work at a big firm, and that was very, very generous. But I know that my work in juvenile court can change the direction of these kids' lives, but also impact the community as a whole. I mean, I don't think there's anybody in our community that doesn't say that we have a juvenile crime problem. We do. And I think that some of that, and we're not going to be able to cure all of it, but some of it I believe we can address with a focused and balanced approach to attacking the causes rather than merely reacting to the symptoms. And that's what I plan on bringing next year in juvenile court.
Before I let you go, I wanted to get into this 12 years that you spent in the reserve. 'Cause I didn't know that about you until I saw one of your most recent flyers where there's a great picture of a handsome young Frank Ierulli in his camo uniform. What got you into that? So your dad was a dentist. I'm assuming it probably wasn't from him, or maybe it was.
Well, I think everybody in that generation spent some part of their life touched, whether through ROTC or something like that in the military. And their picture was of my pop in uniform.
Okay.
But I just thought it would be a great opportunity to serve. I hadn't done the Boy Scout thing yet or been on the museum board, and I loved it. And I still have some very, very close friends, and it provided me with some really wonderful opportunities to use my skill set to benefit, I think, the country as a whole. Now, the ironic thing is I got into the reserves in 98, and
wow.
Then 9/11 happened.
Yeah,
and
3 years later.
It was a whole different army. And in fact, I was in Germany, the first part of September. I came home on the 10th, flew home.
The first part of September 01?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So were you in Germany when?
No, I had just gotten home a couple of days earlier.
Oh, wow.
Much of my team was still over there.
Yeah.
In fact, some of them ended up in Newfoundland.
Oh, wow.
When they diverted flights to Newfoundland because they grounded all the airplanes during 9/11. But it was really just an eye-opening experience. We had to get lots of soldiers ready to deploy. The tempo increased enormously. I loved my 12 years in the Army. I mean, it was really, I would do it again. I would recommend it to my kid in a heartbeat. But it's awfully hard because while I loved it, I had a young family, and my wife had to pick up the slack while I was gone. And the Army gave me great opportunities. I went to Korea. I went to Germany. I went to lots of military bases all over the country that I would have never gone to otherwise. But the time while I was gone, my wife was by herself with 2 little kids and working full time. So to those spouses and significant others of folks in the Army, they really need our gratitude. It's hard
Totally
work
agree.
for them.
Yeah. That's a really nice segue because I always try to end on a more positive note, a more positive question. And I may have met you first, but I probably got to know your wife better first because she and I worked together at Caterpillar. and she's just a wonderful person, and just have so much respect for her as a coworker and as a friend. And I would love to know how you two met.
Well, we met at Landmark Health Club. We were both health club instructors. She had the shift before mine.
What year was this?
1990, I think.
Okay.
I was home for the summer and working at Landmark, and I was a night watchman at Lakeview Pool. And we met there, and we were good friends. I went out to visit her in Breckenridge when I was in law school, and we started dating the following summer.
But you didn't go visit her thinking you were going to be friends. You went to go visit her. You don't go across the country thinking, I'm going to go see my pal.
Well, I was in Omaha at the time.
You were interested. Got it. A little closer.
We were all going to go ski, but I'm enormously fortunate. She's a wonderful person. She's actually flying home tonight from North Carolina from work. But she's a great partner, wonderful spouse, and awfully good mother.
Yeah, you guys make a great team. Before I let you go, how can anybody learn more about you or try to support you?
Well, we have a Facebook page. It's Judge Ierulli at Facebook. I think that's how you.
Okay.
I don't do social.
So you just go to Facebook, search Judge Frank Ierulli. You'll find it.
You'll find the website there. Facebook site there. We also have a website, but it's not terribly functional.
Yeah, it's easy to find though. I just Googled Judge Frank Ierulli and it came right up. I think there's even an option to give on there, and I don't know if judges can ask for people to donate money to them, so I'll do it for you. If you're so inclined to support Judge Ierulli, he's a wonderful candidate. He needs your help. If you go to Google, just Google Judge Frank Ierulli, you'll find his website. There's a donate button there. I encourage you to do it because we got to get him back in there.
Well, thank you so much, Travis.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on, Frank.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
I'm Travis Weaver, and you are listening to the Good People Project.